I'm Nathan Clouse. I'm a technical architect with Vista. I'm also a business applications MVP for the past 4 years. There's my email if you ever want to reach out. I've got 2 blogs, one which is deep technical content related to X++, that's atomicAX.com. Me and a few of the other MVPs also put together Dynamics.FO, where we list out all the new features and data entities that come out by version of F&O. So sometimes, Microsoft's gotten better about that, but historically they haven't been too good. So if you just want a list of new features and data entities by version, you can go to Dynamics.FO. Also, I'm available on most platforms, including Twitter, with Nathan Clouse AX.
And my name is Peter Ramer. I'm a Director of Managed Application Services at RSM. I'm also an MVP, and I have a blog at Dynamics 365 Musings, where I write about a lot of technical topics, as well as a YouTube channel. I usually post those YouTube videos on the same blog, but you can see those details there. You may have noticed we're dressed up as Mario as Luigi. We always try to keep this fun, and you'll see some Mario and Luigi pictures as we kind of go through the slides.
So here's our agenda. We're just going to go through a few different things. That'll keep track of who's supposed to talk when, because we live in very different parts of the country. We don't get a lot of time to practice. We just put different pictures on each slide to say who's going to talk, and then one of us had an arguably bad idea that, like, hey, why don't we dress up like the character on the slide, and that's how we came to look like this.
Nice. Now you know who the most ridiculous people are in the room, so you can all feel good.
So yeah, we'll start out with coding tips. So some of this is going to be pretty basic, but there's, I've started a blog series on like how to actually capture this, but you want to use set-based operations whenever you can. I know there's sort of more work to deal with, but that's stuff like update record set, using insert record list, and you can use insert record list rather than insert record set, and delete from. I know this is pretty basic stuff, but we're actually starting to see that like using set-based operations rather than individual-based operations is actually faster, even when you have a set of just one. So set-based operations are becoming more and more important. Another thing is you can use field numbers as ordinals. So you can see here, I can refer to cust group by cust group, or I can get the field ID for cust group for that specific table, and then refer to it as paren field ID paren. So whatever that field number is, I can refer to it in that way. So if you have a common and you don't know exactly what common it is, you can still address individual attributes on the table by field num if you're able to identify what field ID that is on that common. Next, this is just something that I still happen to see a lot. If you're trying to add financial dimensions for your OData, Microsoft now has a wizard for that, so you can add stuff like store, warehouse, whatever your financial dimensions may be, and it'll just make all the code for you. You don't have to do it manually. And also, this is just here if anyone's ever like, hey, I want financial dimensions on all my OData stuff. There's just a wizard that just does that. Next, commenting code. This is pretty basic, but you can do Control-K, Control-U to comment stuff. You can also do Control/+ to just add a comment to comment out a block of code. So just a quick tip. Quick side note, does anyone know how to get this sort of comment block to be automatically generated?
/ / /
Whack, whack, whack. Yep.
So yeah, Control-K and Control-U, I use these all the time, so again, kind of as Nathan said, if you say Control-K, or you hold down Control-K, and while you're still holding Control, you push the C button, that'll comment out whatever block you've selected, and then Control-K, while you're still holding down Control, push the U button, that'll uncomment the block of text. So find that way faster than doing a /* and dealing with that. Very often you're working on some code, something's not working or something's not compiling, you're like, let's just comment out that piece, make sure that I get a clean compile, make sure that piece works, and then move it back in. So that's just really phenomenal. It works across a lot of different things. You can use that even in SQL Server Management Studio. You can even use it in AX 2012, but I believe it's like Control E in AX 2012. So definitely really useful. You can also format code. So same deal, they call this like a chord. I think you hold down Control K and then you push D on a block of text. That'll help reformat your code, especially if you get your kind of indentations off, your spacing. That always makes it hard. You're deleting if statements, you're adding if statements back in. It's nice to get that all cleaned up, and it's even a best practice if you've got the wrong indentation in your code. So it just makes it a lot easier. All right, F9, you can use F9 to toggle a breakpoint, and so that's just a good reminder for all you guys. Again, some pretty basic stuff. Your short keys for F10, F11, F12, F9 to toggle breakpoints. If you're a developer for any length of time, right, you're going to spend a lot of time debugging, and it really helps if you're not having to click those tiny icons up in the toolbox or toolbar. You really use those F keys, F9 to turn breakpoints on and off. I like to, this may be personal preference, I like to even add breakpoints a little bit as bookmarks for myself. Maybe I'm not actually planning on debugging it, but I want to kind of highlight it. Maybe I've taken a screenshot. That helps me kind of recognize, oh yeah, that's an important line of code. I want to come back to that or remember. As I'm scrolling through, it's much more easier to see. Additionally, and this is one I don't use nearly enough, but you can use F9 within Visual Studio to get to a lot of different things. So in the design view, you can go to the main thing for an item selected. If you're on a table extension, it'll take you back to the base table. If you're on a field, it'll take you to the EDT. So how often are you on a table, you're looking at a field, and you're like, oh, I see this as an enum, but what are my various enum options? I forget about this and I go to my Application Explorer and I'm searching for my EDT after looking it up in the properties and finding it. Well, you can just push F9 and it'll go to that underlying EDT. And if you forget, you can always right-click on a field and you'll actually see that this in the context menu. Go to base EDT and it'll show that it's F9 in case you forget. But F9 is phenomenal. You can use it to take to a related relation. You can do it on a data entity and it'll open the table for that entity. You can do it on chain of command and it'll go on the main class. So I need to start using this one a lot more. In the design view, you can expand methods, right-click, copy event handler. So you can see pre and post event handlers. I think I got one more here. In the design view, you can, go ahead.
I just had a quick question for the room. So who uses just the eventing framework, event handlers, as their start? So show of hands. Okay, a few. And then what about COC? So most everyone starts with COC, and if that doesn't work, then you use event handlers. Okay.
That I was going to chime in. I'm kind of biased. I know this is a hot topic. I'm interested in the debate. In general, I'm all about COC. I think chain of command is easier to read. You can have code before the base code and after, all in the same one. If you're adding multiple, methods to the same underlying kind of object, you just need the one attribute up top. You don't need the attributes on every single method. I just think the attributes for event handlers are a little harder to remember even. I mean, granted, you can use this trick to pull it up, but I'm definitely all about chain of command. But I know a lot of us are, from the period where we came over with D365 and chain of command was not available. So we really had to learn some of this event handlers. I do think there's still some cases where event handlers absolutely make sense. But yeah, always interesting to see what people are using. All right, one more. So sales order totals. If you're not familiar, sales order totals are not actually stored off in a table. They are calculated essentially each and every time from the sales table header, sales line data, etc. And so you can use this sales totals class and then call salestotals.calc to have it calculate all of the various totals. X++ is going to shove them into various containers, and then you can use these methods to read out the total tax amount, total amount, total markup. So definitely a useful tool. I've got a blog article just on
Just one quick thing that you can flip back. Who here is on AX 2009 or 2012? Okay, a few. So this happens automatically in 2009 and 2012. It does not in 365, well, F&O. So that's why this is an important distinction. There's actually a batch job that you can schedule to recalculate all your sales totals, but it doesn't just happen because you happen to have a sales order in. We'll calculate it on demand when you bring up the sales total form, or there's a batch job. Older versions just did it each time the sales order updated.
Okay, extensible controls. I'm curious, maybe I'll ask the room too. Has anyone ever created an extensible control? A couple people in the back. Yeah, I would say this is maybe not your most common tip, but I think it's pretty cool. You can use JavaScript and HTML to create your own custom control. Maybe you need a Gantt chart or some kind of control that doesn't exist in our base controls. That's pretty neat. Now, obviously there's trade-offs to that of supportability, recognizability, can people know what you're doing? Is there a more standard control that users are going to understand what they are? But they're definitely there. I could see they're useful for, some different calendar controls as well.
Actually, you can hold on, I can raise the keys over.
Sure.
So if you're doing anything with like custom services, inside Visual Studio, this is just a C# thing, but it's nice to know that it's there. You can go to Edit and Paste Special, so if you have in your clipboard, if you have anything XML or JSON, you can paste that as a collection of classes that represent the deserialized version of the XML or JSON. So you can take something like this on the left and turn it into C# on the right, and that's pretty close to what you need in X++. Not exact, but it's much easier than starting from nothing. Conversely, if you're using ChatGPT, that can do something similar if you can give it the prompts, like train it how to write X++ from serialized XML or JSON. And if you don't have either the paste as XML or JSON, in Visual Studio, just bring up the configurator thing for the setup, and you have to install ASP.NET Web Development, and that'll install the XML version. JSON should almost always be there.
All right, cross-company. So again, you may work with a lot of different clients, or you may have data in different legal entities, and you may want to write a batch job or some kind of code that actually processes across those legal entities, rather than maybe setting up a batch job in each one of your 100 legal entities. So you can use this keyword cross-companies to loop through different companies. You can do the syntax :con companies and put in, or it's really colon, the name of your container variable. So we've got con companies up at the top. We've listed the different companies that we want to process through. That's one way that we can do it if we want to do a subset. Otherwise, we can just use cross-company to kind of loop through all. I think I got a few slides here that zoom in a little bit on that cross-company functionality. So here's another one we can use cross-company in data sources. I think that one's pretty small, but we can use the syntax .add company range and actually list out the different companies we want to add to a query object as well. So here's a zoomed in version of that. So definitely really useful, especially if you're working with a bunch of different companies. Next, we've got a run as permission. So we can actually run different processes as a different user or permission. Can be really helpful in certain situations, such as maybe SharePoint integration in this case. All right, then there's a lot of string functions. So if you search for any of these, string keep, etc., you're going to find a good little site that's all the string-related X++ runtime functions. That's usually the easiest way, is look at that and find your examples. So this one's kind of a special one, but it's always good to know. This is string keep. So you can specify here the list of characters that you'd like to keep. So maybe you've got a telephone number, classic example, where maybe there's dashes, other characters in it. You can specify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Those are the characters that I want to keep. And then take everything else out. So in this case, take out this extra comma and go from there. And that can be helpful for a comparison string or restoring something back in. We've got string rfix and string lfix. Again, these are a little less common known, but these are really phenomenal for padding. So most of the time I see people padding, either maybe zeros at the end on the right side or at the left side, so you can specify, okay, here's my overall value, here's how long I need it to be, and here's the character, in this case 0, that I want to put either at my left or right side. So usually that can be fairly complicated to code or figure out by hand, but thankfully there's some really great string functions. There's lots of others, so I definitely recommend you check them out. Another cool thing is X++ can actually call C# and .NET code. So it's definitely something you want to be a little careful with. We shouldn't just hire a bunch of .NET developers and then code away .NET code within X++. You'll notice there's some hiccups. There's sometimes the objects don't, IntelliSense doesn't show everything you need to, or you need to work with CLR objects and then convert it back. But if you've got some offloaded process, some DLL where you need to call a bunch of code, maybe you have some code that needs to be called from several different places, including F&O, calling .NET can be really helpful. You'll notice Microsoft does this with their retail pricing engine. They're going to call this .NET DLL so they can pass in some information, calculate price, calculate retail discounts, and they do that because they're going to use that same pricing engine code within F&O, but then also within the commerce scale unit for calculating cart prices on the website, as well as the point of sale. So that's a great application where we're using .NET because it's more compatible across several different applications. So definitely recommend that. You can call an external web service, handle some JSON. Some of those are really better in .NET using some of those existing .NET libraries. So here's a quick example of that.
And just a quick call out, the stuff that is highlighted, that's X++, everything else is C#. Well, in this instance, I think I'm connecting to an Azure Service Bus queue, and that's what, three or four lines of X++, and everything else is pretty much just .NET.
Okay, some other stuff. So if you can't find an error message, honestly, this is something that I focus on a ton when I'm teaching our new hires. There's several different ways that can help debug. You can put a breakpoint in the info classes add method. And then whatever error message is popping up is going to flow through that class, whether it's an info log, warning, or error. So that's phenomenal. Then you can look at the call stack and see what's going on. Maybe then go up the call stack to where the real error is kind of being thrown, put a breakpoint there, run it once more, use debug tools, the watch, etc., to look at those variables, understand what the error message is. The other thing that I recommend all the time that's phenomenal in D365 is if you get an error message, you can take that label, that string, go into Visual Studio, go to Edit Labels, search for that label. Sometimes it's a little tricky if they're using some string format, but find that label. You can actually right-click, say Find All References, and it's going to find all references of that error message. You can, if there's 10 of them, who cares? Just add a breakpoint to all 10 and rerun the process. Now, arguably, putting a breakpoint in an info add might be a little quicker, but if you didn't want to debug it and just wanted to see if you could find the one place in code where this label is, you can find it really quickly that way. So I definitely recommend using that. You can use functions like function name to help spit out the name of the function. You can use query build data source to string to see the SQL query that's being built, or you can even hover over the query build data source as you're debugging, and it's going to show you kind of the X++ / SQL version of that query. Data entities can be temperamental, db sync, delete entity, rebuild list, So test again. So data entities, make sure you're sometimes following those same steps again of regenerating your staging table again.
So who here uses or has heard of D365FO Tools? Just a few? Okay. So D365FO Tools is a community, open source, free PowerShell library that can do all kinds of really great things, especially inside your dev box. That can really just speed up the kind of stuff we're working on. It's really easy to install or update. That's how you do that up there. But from PowerShell, you can just start issuing commands, and this is very similar to some of the tooling we saw in 2012 near the end with R3, where you can have just PowerShell commands to do stuff, so you can stop your environment and shut everything down, like terminate all processes. You can also start an environment or start certain portions of an environment. Just all kinds of utility. You can also restart it. Depending on what version of IIS it's currently running, it will skip IIS Express, but W3 it will see. So it depends on if Visual Studio is open or not, how it's going to interact. But it just gives you all kinds of utility value to just turn everything off before you do like an update or something along those lines, or you just want to reset everything because it's active goofy. Plenty of utility value there. This I need to verify still works because Microsoft removed a bunch of tooling, and I don't know why they did that. But you can set the administrator on a dev box using just a PowerShell command. Set D365admin rather than the re-admin tool that they have since removed for some reason. So far as I know, this still works. If it doesn't, that means the underlying stuff that made this work, Microsoft removed. Also, you can use D365FO Tools to interact with some of the LCS APIs, so you can tell it to export a database from any of your sandbox environments. This can be really useful, just schedule exports of databases, so you can, let's say every Friday night, take your UAT database, put it in LCS, and then you can have extra automation to take that and just automatically ingest it into a dev box in a staged area, so you're not messing with any data that may be in there. But again, just more automation options. So I'm not sure about you guys, but the less time I spend in LCS, the less time I spend waiting for LCS, makes my day all that much better. You can also do like a refresh, schedule a refresh from prod to sandbox if you want. So if you want to have a 2-week schedule where you take prod and put it in UAT, you can schedule that with PowerShell, and you can do that with any engine that can schedule tasks. You can even use build pipelines if you want to do that. Anything that can handle PowerShell. It'll also let you sync specific modules inside of your package's local directory if you want to do that. So you can say get module, whatever, and then invoke database sync. So then, first of all, you can do a DB sync outside of Visual Studio. So Visual Studio won't be tied up while that's going. And then you can give it specific modules. It's probably going to be like your custom module that you're working on. And it'll just do that in the background, and you can keep on working. And Visual Studio isn't tied up for that. You can also do a partial DB sync, so you can give a specific table name or wildcard name. So you can say, I just want to sync, for instance, sales table and the customer entity. You can just tell it whatever it is you want to sync, and it'll sync that one thing, and then move on. Also, you can just tell it to do a whole DB sync behind this, in PowerShell, apart from Visual Studio, so you can keep on working. And really, I want to call out, so you can tell it to be really verbose. So if there's something weird going on, you can just look at the output from the verbose DB sync, and that might give you a clue as to what's going on. This is really helpful, like if you change the size, like this happened to me maybe a year ago. I changed the underlying size of some extended data type related to production resourcing, And that gets used in some view, that gets used in some view, that gets used in some view, and then like 15 views later, I'm still trying to figure it out, and it's because I had to go to each view and change each view as well. And this was able to help me find all that stuff. Also, you can use D365 Tools to install any supporting software you might want, like Chrome, which is I think the last one there. But you can have it install whatever you want, and it's just a streamlined process of it'll download, install it, and then it's just there. Also, you can use it to get the URL for wherever you're working. That might be an LCS, but if you're using like a VHD, you might have that offhand for whatever that is, especially if you've exposed it externally. So again, just some cool utility functions. You can also use it to search your AOT for specific objects. There's a few examples here, but you basically just say what I'm looking for, some kind of search token of some kind. Tell it where to search that, and then basically what object type you're looking for. So like if what was it, sys cache flush AOD or something like that, this would potentially find that because it is a class with flush in the name, and it's going to be in that location if you're using a VHD. So just sort of more cool utility functions. You can set your environment to manually be in maintenance mode. I need to move that down a little bit, but it's just enable maintenance mode, disable maintenance mode, and it'll flip it between the two. So if you're in your dev box and you need to do something where you're changing the chart of account structure or whatever, now there's a quick handy tool. You don't have to update SQL, restart everything, all that good stuff. This is probably the one I use the most, which is importing a database into a dev box. So the first command there installs all the prereqs to make this work. The second one actually will import it and put it into my new database name. So you can use this to stage new databases or updated data for your devs in a database that is not AXDB, like on a weekend or just whenever their VMs are on and they're just working. And then the next command, I think it's a few slides actually, you can just flip the two databases around, so it'll shut everything, turn all IIS off, make sure Visual Studio is closed, flip the databases around. Now your dev has all the same data that was in the new database, and they've still got their old database as well. So you can just do sort of a switcheroo on the databases, and then your devs have all new data, and this can be done all behind the scenes, with the exception of that sort of switcheroo at the end. You can also export databases into a backpack using this, which just makes it way easier. Again, utility value. And then you would use this for if you've got like your gold environment is in a dev box rather than a tier 2. You can export gold as a backpack and then bring it into some like data migration environment or UAT or wherever you're going to use it.
Quality of life. All right.
All right, I'll just stop touching.
Yeah, one other way that we can search for code within F&O is you can download a tool called File Locator Pro, or they also call it Agent Ransack, but that sounds more like malware, so I think they smartly recalled it File Locator Pro. But it's way better at searching in files than Windows is. So I definitely use it for lots of things when I'm looking for things in my own directory, but you can point it at that K drive packages local directory and search all of the existing base Microsoft code as well. Sometimes I'm looking for something that I don't know the name of. Doing find all references is really helpful, but if I don't know the name, but I'm looking for something that's CSV related or I'm not finding correctly with find all references, I can use that File Locator Pro, search all the locations in those files, and it searches extremely fast. So I wanted to point that out as well.
Actually, who knows the use case for where find all references doesn't actually find all references? There's one use case not covered by it. And you'd only know if you had to deal with it. It doesn't know about all delegates. So if you use delegates, find references will not find all delegates all the time. I can't figure out why, but I had to help a dev find a delegate. It was like it should be under find references, and it just wasn't there. And then eventually we got, I think it was Agent Ransack back then, we found out, it was like, this should show up under references, but it's not there. And it was because we had this sort of weird delegates are off to the side. So find all references is really great except for delegates. Hopefully you're not using delegates. Those are really sort of can of worms, but if you are, they may not always show up within references.
And I remember one other term, with find all references, you're really looking for the whole name of a method, a class, or whatever. Maybe you want a substring. I know for us, we prefix all of our code with, a few letters, RSM in our case, right? And so being able to search for just those characters will show up more results than if I were looking for a particular method or class. So that can be helpful as well. All right, copy data from Excel and D365 Grid. So I recently wrote a few different articles about how you can use Excel, you can export to Excel, use Excel added, but another really useful feature is if you've got Excel with the same columns as the grid that you're looking to import, you can just copy a bunch of different rows into that grid using copy and paste. It's really amazing. You just want to make sure that your rows are lining up, but it will insert the records, call the insert methods, create your record, use all that good stuff. But this can be a phenomenal way as opposed to record by record, having to type in things column by column. So really fast to get it in. One trick, right? Use your personalizations, add the columns that you need so that it is matching what you got in Excel, hide any columns you don't need, that kind of thing. Make sure you've included all the inventory columns.
So just I want to just echo that. It is a really powerful feature, especially when you're looking at like code tables. If you've got like your source system that would have all your codes in it, it's typically going to be a code description. Find a way to get that out of Excel, copy paste, go over to F&O. There, you've just migrated data for your code tables. That's it. Really simple, really powerful. It does require the new grid control, which I think is much more stable than historically it has been. But great feature, definitely check it out.
Just another reminder while I'm thinking about it, there's a lot in feature management. I definitely recommend, I know we're talking about tech tips, but go into feature management and review the ones that maybe have not been enabled. You'd be surprised how many features you might go, oh no, this would be really helpful if we're enabled. One is a little bit more functional tip, but around credit card auth trans, right? That's usually the biggest table that I see for retailers where these authorizations and captures store huge XML strings in that record that can make people's databases way larger. Microsoft's recently released a cleanup job for helping to archive that credit card auth trans data. I think some of it you might need to enable with the flight as opposed to feature management. I need to look again, but it's always a good idea to kind of check some of those that can help with some of what we're trying to do. Okay, table browser, right? Very often we want to be able to look at the data in a table without the hindrance of a form and what it may or may not show. So I've got a blog article that kind of breaks down a few different ways you can open the table browser, but it really does come down to this magic trick with the URL. You get the environment URL, you've got ME equals, in this case, the form that runs the table browser is called systable browser. Then we have ampersand table name equals the name of the table. So if you know this trick, you can just straight up type it in. There's also a Chrome extension that helps type that in for you. You can also go in Visual Studio and right click on a table and say open in table browser. But this can be really phenomenal because maybe you've already got a table browser open, and if you know the structure of this, all you need to do is change that last little part, the name of the table, to switch to a different table. And I find that really helpful. You can sometimes look at two different records, one that's working, one that's not, and I like to go through all the columns and say, okay, which column's different? Oh, that's maybe where the issue is. Question or comment?
Yeah, on this tool, which is really it's fantastic, we have a situation where it's only usable by an admin.
Yes.
And is there any way around that?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I think from a permission standpoint, roles are there to help protect data. And so, yes, you do need a system admin. So in prod, if you're looking at table browser, you do need that sysadmin role. I would recommend, if you've got a frequent use case, you may want to create a custom form that's surfacing the data you need. So, great. Okay, so you also want to start Visual Studio. Oh, I see this maybe got updated. This used to say Visual Studio 2017, but now we're working in Visual Studio 19. I'm sure eventually this will be 2022. But you want to run Visual Studio as an admin. If you don't right-click Run as admin every time, right, F&O is going to complain. It's not going to work right. So one trick that you can do is right-click on that start icon. Go to Properties, then click the Advanced Properties button, and you're going to see this little checkbox, Run as Administrator. You can click OK. Now when you click on that shortcut in your taskbar or wherever else, it's always going to run as an admin. I'm on so many dev boxes that I forget which one I've done this to, so usually I'm still right-clicking Run as admin, but definitely really helpful. That's going to cause, prevent some errors further down.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. So Peter and I have done similar, this presentation or similar a couple different places. These slides are in here because we can still keep on running into this. I know this is basic, but people still don't do it. So that's why it's still here.
Yeah. And it'll trip you up, and then you're just like, why isn't it letting me run my code? Why is this not working? Things like that. So you can also do the same thing, same for VS 2017. I think this is actually meant for same for SQL Server Management Studio as well. You can run that as admin.
So next, since I talked about 365FO Tools, you can actually incorporate it into Visual Studio. So then you've just got a console down at the bottom. But you can just have a new window down here for your PowerShell interactive window, and then from inside Visual Studio you can call the same commands from 365FO Tools right there in Visual Studio, so you don't have to have anything, any other windows open if you don't want. But you can see down at the bottom, I invoked dbsync, and for my processes, the sync engine is going, but Visual Studio is still free and available to do whatever else I want to do in there.
Here in PowerShell, you have to type it in.
Yep. And you can also use aliases inside PowerShell. So if we use, if you do notepad $profile, it'll bring up the profile for that PowerShell instance. And then you can create a shortcut for whatever it is you want. So like, this is just an example. I want to just call it dbsync because I can't seem to remember invoke dbsync for whatever reason. So I just put in an alias to that command of dbsync. So in Visual Studio, in this interactive PowerShell window, if I type in dbsync, it'll call invoke dbsync. But it's just a different way to customize how I want to work and just have sort of magic happen behind the scenes. Next, so who here works a lot in SSMS with directly querying data using SQL? So you can use no-lock if you've got an uncommitted transaction to see what the state of your particular data is. No-lock means allow dirty pages, which means allow uncommitted transactions to be visible in the query result. It's not something you typically use in a reporting scenario. This is in a database class. I don't want to get in trouble, but don't use no-lock when doing reporting because we don't want to report on dirty pages. But for debugging, it's perfectly fine.
And one comment, just again, that I see developers can be a lot faster at debugging certain data if they know T-SQL. Sometimes you've got this complicated X++ while select statement. X++ is not great at spitting out, all the info or all the records. It's not always clear, hey, why is the record I'm looking for not getting returned by this huge join? Being able to be able to translate that into T-SQL, being comfortable enough of quickly writing it. SQL Server Management Studio is a way better tool for spitting out the records, really giving you that view. You can comment out a join or change it to an outer join to quickly see, oh, it's this join that's causing that record to no longer be included.
So next we're going to talk about debugging.
Sure. doing the same thing, sorry. So debugging, you know, this is something crucial to all development, all technical people, but it's definitely has little tricky pieces. So when you want to debug batch jobs, make sure you're attaching to this batch.exe instead of the IIS Express or W3WP executable. So definitely look for that. So remember in Visual Studio, you go attach to debugger or attach to process, and then click on the checkbox to show all processes for all users, and then look for that batch.exe. If it's not running, you need to go make sure your batch service is running, but hopefully that is running. Okay, then there's really 3 different places too that you need to check to make sure your symbols have loaded. I don't know, it's just for fun. Who's had problems where maybe not all your symbols have loaded? So yeah, I think just everyone. So very common piece. So there's 3 kind of places you want to check in Visual Studio debug options, and then under Dynamics 365, go to debugging. There's this load symbols only for items and solutions. I think we'll come back to that one in just a second. Yeah, we got a few things here. This has even changed since last time we talked about this. Now you've got this option where you can specify which modules that you want to load symbols for. I do think this is helpful. I usually tell people who are new to debugging, just say select all. Even if it takes 2 minutes to load all your symbols the first time, it's usually faster afterwards. It's way less frustrating than constantly not getting your symbols to load and having to do it again. But I have had developers where they're working on a cloud-hosted VM, they're running out of memory, things are crashing because of it. So being able to only select a subset of modules is really helpful. But you do want this. Sometimes you're F12ing into something, or you're stepping into some code, and if you haven't loaded the symbols for it, then you're going to run into issues. So I like to select a lot, usually all of these. In here, under debugging symbols, there's Microsoft Symbol Service. You can check that. And then similar deal here, load all modules is what I usually select or recommend people start with. And then if you're debugging the same thing over and over again, and you want to speed up some of that, you can exclude modules or just list them.
They usually uncheck that symbol server?
I usually leave it checked, but that's just for me to make sure that everything gets loaded.
It defaults to being unchecked though, you have to manually.
I don't remember what it defaults to, so it probably is default checked, but I just see sometimes it becomes unchecked. That may be one reason that is turning people off.
Okay, so there's some Visual Studio hidden gems. Some of these are relatively new, at least in the last year or so, where you can right-click on something and create an extension for that thing in a new project. And that can either be an extension or like an extension of the base object or a code extension. So we've got create extension that's being pointed out by the arrow, and then down to create a new code extension. So if you want to extend a table, that's just an extension. If you want to add a code extension, that's the next option. We've now updated model parameters from our context menu from a project that belongs to a particular package. So you can just shortcuts that make life a little bit easier. Next is we have the option to order labels in the file by their ID. I've not run into any specific issues before this. I think this was actually your tip, so I'm curious what this is used for, because I'm not running into any issues.
I'm trying to remember if I added this specifically as well. I think it's just another way that you can do it. Usually I'm using Control F to try to find my label, or search in the label file. So.
Oh yeah, because it's chronological by default, and then everything else in base is by label ID. So that's how your label file.
Yeah, I think typically I want to see like the most recent ones that I've added. That's usually the one that I'm editing as well. So yeah, you may not want that. You may want to uncheck that.
So next we've got sort of 3 new options that haven't gotten a lot of press really. There's run the supercharge checks, run app checker rules, and load app checker diagnostics. So these are just additional code quality type things that you can add in. So supertext is a way to, I gotta explain this in 30 seconds. It's a way to take your code and turn it into something that you can query against. And from that, you can get some reasoning and logic behind, here's a pattern and this one class does not adhere to that pattern, stuff like that. And then there's related to that, there's app checker rules related to your supertext output that comes out. So again, like this class doesn't meet these rules or is somehow different than everything else, or doesn't meet the app checker rules for Microsoft. So there's just additional feedback you can get. These will show up as warnings, and the last one is you can make those warnings as errors.
I was at a conference a few years back, and they were saying this is going to become, we check by default, that you could not check it, and if it wouldn't pass supertext or the app checker, you can't deploy. Is that still? But it was a long time ago, and they said in 2 months, it's going to be mandatory. So I ran it for all my projects, and I fixed hundreds of warnings. Is that still?
Yeah, the issue is that if Microsoft were trying this on for themselves, they wouldn't be able to ship their own product. So it probably will happen once Microsoft fixes all that stuff. When that's going to be, it's anyone's guess. I mean, it's good information to have, but I wouldn't say, all right, let's carve out 3 months of dev time to address all these warnings. Just as you're working, once a week or whatever, find 10 and get rid of them. Before you know it, they'll all be gone in a year or two. But it's just additional feedback.
So another cool thing, you're elite developer, right? You can do dark mode. You can definitely do some cool custom colors. Let's see, I think I've got another one here. So yeah, you can see some good colors if you want to change and be different than your colleagues, right? They're like, oh, why does your screen look like that? So definitely some cool stuff in here. Here's another one of those settings where you can adjust some of those fonts and colors. A couple more, I think I don't have a slide in here. You can, within the options under Dynamics 365, you can do organize by type. There's a checkbox that you can check within Visual Studio, and then as you add different new objects to your project and to your solution, it will create a folder for them and organize them by table, extended data type, form, etc. class. And so that's really nice, especially if you're adding more than a few objects that have them nicely organized by that. Let's see. Next one.
Just another example of custom colors that you can do. Also inside the Application Explorer, this doesn't get talked about all that much, but there's another, they put in like a search box there that is multi-purpose, so you can search by just direct name, or you can use some of this sort of interesting syntax, where you can search for stuff of a particular type, a particular extension point, really anything that you can think of in there. I've got a few more examples. So the last one, I can look for event handlers and event delegates. That's how I find all my delegates. Even if find references doesn't find them. Additionally, like if you're looking for something based on a collection name, so that I know what my OData entity surfaces as, but I have no idea how to match that to the actual artifact inside of F&O. I can query on a public collection name, customer statistic groups, because that's how it surfaces outside, and then get me back to the actual entity that represents that public collection name. So just interesting stuff to know.
One other comment, kind of what I'm thinking about related to that. When you open the form designer within Visual Studio, you're going to have a little search on the top of the designer window. If you type in E:, it's going to filter to just show your extensions for that form. I find that really helpful when you're working with.
Actually here later.
Oh, is it here? Sorry, I forgot we had a slide there. But that's really phenomenal because, yeah, you can have these forms that are really embedded deep in those nodes, modifying sales table forms. So being able to quickly filter, I know that's helpful in code reviews, to say, hey, just show me the changes that I made. Focus on that.
Yep, another community tools is Try-Doodles 365. So this allows you, so if you worked with 2009 or 2012 and you had like the configurable X++ tooling that you could just write your own stuff for, and then you have a context menu for calling your custom stuff. This is very similar, so it brings a lot of that over, and then you can plug your own stuff in. So if you find yourself prototyping a lot of tables, so there's like a table create wizard, which is just a grid where you put in column name, primitive data type, and it'll just create that table for you and like stage some EDTs. So again, just cool utility. If you find yourself doing a lot of the same time-intensive task, you can streamline it here a little bit. Lastly, what you just talked about, this is more along the lines of undocumented feature / bug. I could not find anything about this that was official documentation. But yeah, up in the design view, if you type in E:, it'll show you only the new stuff that was added to that form extension. You can do this with other design views as well, but this is where I use it all the time. When I have an extension, I have no idea what was added to this giant form like sales table, and I just want to see what was added. So there were 2 things added on this form extension. And then along those same lines, if you type in L:, it will fully explode out every node tree that exists in that form. Not particularly useful, I don't use this a lot, but it is there. And I just quick ran through every other letter and number. Those do nothing. Just E and L are the only things that do anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, save you some time.
In terms of resources, we've got all kinds of, this is where we got a lot of this stuff from. There's this slide. I'll leave it here for a minute with people taking pictures. These will be up on the app by end of day. I was just making some edits last night.
And maybe, yeah, I can think of a couple more changes before you, maybe to give people time on this slide. Oh yeah, I forgot the other one. Another one that's more recent, right? You can promote code or I should maybe rephrase that, right? You can run custom code in production without actually applying a package. So we've got kind of a whole other article and video on that, but that's something, that's been around for maybe a year or so now, but definitely really useful. You can write your own runnable job. You have to put it in your own separate model, kind of at each and every single time, but then you can upload that model within production. You do need 2 different users with different kind of roles, one to approve that and one to upload it, and then finally you can run a test run, make sure that that's run correctly, that the logs are printing out what you expect to, and then you can run it. You can only run that job once, and then you've got to build another model, even if you're trying to run like the same code. But that can be really useful to correct some data. I've definitely had clients where we've got a critical issue, this thing is broken, we need this fixed now, and we can't do it using the front end. Being able to write a real quick job without bringing production down for a couple hours to make that correction is really useful. It does take a little bit of time, but once you've practiced it a few times, it is actually pretty quick to fall through on those steps.
So we have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to open up the floor for any questions on any of this stuff, or if there's any tips or tricks you wanted to share that you found, please feel free. And if there are no questions, I thought we could talk a little bit about one product, one platform.
Great.
Because that probably got excluded because that came out like 2 weeks ago.
But yeah, questions, other tips that you guys have, I'd love to hear.
Question about the bulk operations. When you do insert or update record set and you've got a UTC date time there, it always implies the time zone and it won't work. Is there a workaround for that?
I would think for UTC date time, when you use insert record set,
If you're setting a timestamp from another table here, I use temp tables a lot, so I'm setting it to a temp table. It thinks there should be, it is generating a time zone field, and it's saying your fields don't match up. You're inserting more than you're retrieving.
Okay, I haven't tried that. Now I'm really curious to try that out.
Yeah,
Okay.
that specific use case I will run into, but you're right, it's going to create, when you have a UTC, it's actually 2 behind the scenes, because it's the date time component, and the time zone component has a different field.
Yeah.
So I'll have to test and see if that's, it might actually be a bug that no one's reported to Microsoft.
It's all, you can Google it and find people complaining about about it, but I've never found a fix for it.
Look at that. I know, one comment with those records, sets, insert record set, that kind of thing, depending on if you've overridden the insert or the update method, it may go record by record and slow back down to, what it is. So you may need to, in your table buffer, say skip data methods, so it doesn't do that and you keep your performance, but that's something to keep in mind. You want to do that, you need to account for that. But I haven't run into that specific use case, so I'll have to check that out.
Does the sites that you guys run or that you use have a good guide for setting up a new dev VM box the first time and a lot of good practices to set lots of settings?
It does. I have one that shows you how to download and start up the VM. I don't have one that specifically tells you how to set up source control, but Nathan's got some good tips on, setting up Git as we start to move more in that world. I do think we've got this universal development experience coming out, these new environments, and I think as we get those set up, I'll be creating some videos for that as well.
So just sort of answer your question, one of the things we're working on with the D365FO Tools is just you install that and then say, like, set up standard environment, and it'll set up Git, it'll install Chrome, it'll install all the common stuff we typically see. You still got to open Visual Studio and license it to yourself, but that's just a licensing component. So we're slowly working on that. So tools are written by a guy named Mats. I believe he's in Denmark. He's really busy, I'm really busy, so we're ever so slowly creeping towards just a command that will just take the base image from when it was deployed and then set up all the common tools you would use, and then from there you can add in whatever else you'd like.
Setting the default models one I miss a lot.
Sure. Yeah, default stuff leak management. Yeah, another tip?
Yeah, I had a question.
Question?
So on that topic of the D365FO Tools and the unified developer experience, will any of that stuff work, or like is it hopefully someday all those tools will work in a unified environment? Or?
The unified environment will actually be running on your local VM, right. So that actually makes the D365FO Tools sort of redundant, because we have a very limited amount of time. It will download everything that you need to your laptop, and then shift your laptop and it's set up however you want it to be set up. All of the other stuff related to IIS and infrastructure, that's actually going to be handled by Microsoft out in the cloud, and you just connect to that environment.
I think it would be nice you set up your environment the way you want it, your colors, your whatever. You don't have to do that over and over again because you're on a new VM.
And then you code, you build, you can do whatever you want, and then say, all right, I've got some new stuff to push out to my paired cloud dev, and then all the binaries go out from there. And then you can still connect to it and debug because all the symbols are there and all that good stuff. But the infrastructure behind what makes D365FO Tools sort of good and useful is now out in the cloud, and it's talking with Visual Studio, so there's no point to have those tools in here.
Yeah, good question. Other questions, comments? Yeah?
Yeah, dev box performance. Has anyone noticed that after doing a compile, it takes a very long time for you to actually access your environment?
Yes. So I actually did a very long article talking about dev performance. There's two major limiting factors, so you can modify your VMs a little bit based on this. And we're talking about at most a 25% uplift in performance. We're not talking, like we're going from, Ford Focus to a Ferrari or anything like that. The number of disks on your VM is a primary leading indicator of how slow it's going to be. So if you add more disks, it doesn't matter what type of disks those are. They can just be plain old hard drives, like the slowest magnetic storage available. It can be that type, just add 16 rather than 3 or 5, and you'll get better performance. And getting hardware that is on the tier that has the fastest clock speed for the CPU. Doesn't matter what it is, we just need higher clock rates, and that will help Visual Studio respond faster. So I usually do like a from the D4, D4 or D5 family, just because that's newer hardware and it's just faster. It doesn't typically cost any more, but I'll do that with 16 disks, and it's a much more acceptable experience. It's not great, but it's better than like DS13v2. Those are just like, I want to open Visual Studio, I'm going to go get my coffee, go get my mail, read the newspaper, come back in 15 minutes, now I've got Visual Studio. It'll much better, but it's not.
And while it doesn't help with performance, you can set up those start-stop scripts in Azure to turn off those dev environments, overnight. That may take it a little bit longer to speed up, but maybe that justifies you save the cost by turning it off, but you can add a couple of these drives, which then can increase your performance.
Right, and just to dovetail on that, the fastest VM combination that I found is the L series. Those have a SSD backplane. You have to use SSDs for those, and you can upgrade those to have ultra-fast SSDs if your subscription allows it. And then those cost about $1,800 per month if left on. Schedule them so they're only on when you're using them, and that will save you some money. So it might be okay with your Azure admins because it'll be about $800 a month, which is about the cost of a DS13 V2 just left on 24 hours a day. So they may not even notice if you can do some Azure tricks. But they are much more expensive. To get like a really responsive machine, it's expensive.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you watching. If you liked the video, click the like button. I also invite you to push the subscribe button as well. If there's other topics you would like to see a video on, please post in the comments and I'll see what I can do. I hope you learned something new today. Thank you.